Hello and welcome, my dear viewers, to my small hobby YouTube channel. I'll be your host, Tomo, and today is time for a tutorial. So, today I'm gonna redo a tutorial that I posted on Saturday, and it's a tutorial about airbrushes, or my airbrush in particular. Now, the reason that I'm doing this tutorial again is because I saw that a lot of my shots were out of frame, and that kind of sucked because I'm a bit of a noob. So I decided to do this again, but this time properly, and hopefully it's going to be much better. So the airbrush that I'm using is this one. It's the Harder and Steenbeck Evolution airbrush, double action airbrush. Double action just means that when you have this trigger and you can push down on the trigger, you release the air, and when you pull back on the trigger, you release the paint. So the combination of down and back gives you a precise amount of paint that you need for your application. So you can be doing a really fine work, or you can do just like big spray of big areas. And I was one of those guys who was like hesitant whether or not I should start using an airbrush or not, because I was like, oh man, you have to learn so much stuff and maybe I'm not gonna be good at it. But honestly, guys, this is the best thing you can do for your upgrade, you know, for your kit in general, if you want to improve your level of performance in kit building. So yeah, this is really good. I was also fortunate enough to receive this as a gift, so thank you so much, because this airbrush is not the cheapest airbrush, but it's really good. Like all the things that I have, I always buy like better stuff, better equipment, better tools, because better tools usually give you better performance, and I think that this is one of the better tools. Of course, there are better airbrushes out there and worse, but I think this one is just phenomenal. I really enjoy using it. So now I'm just gonna show you some of the tricks that I've learned how to use it and maintain it. Okay, so let's get started. So the airbrush. Now I've been using this airbrush, so it needs a little cleaning. And the first thing you want to do when you want to clean the airbrush is unscrew the back portion. This reveals the needle and the screw that holds the needle in place. This is just like a tensioning screw, I guess. So what you want to do is just untighten it a little bit. You just have to do like a quarter of the way. You don't have to let go or 360 on it. You loosen it up, and then you take the needle and you just drag it out. And as you can see, the needle is black and dirty because I was using black paint previously. Okay, so the next thing you can do to disassemble this is you can take this back portion off. You just untighten this and it reveals this mechanism. Now, the first thing that I did when I got the airbrush, I completely took it apart. I'm just curious how things work, and I wanted to see how this functions. So inside here, if I unscrew this to the end, you'll see a spring, and it's just like this piston, or against this tube through which the needle goes. And every time you press the trigger, this spring just pulls the needle back into its original position. So right, just does this. Now you don't need to maintain this very much. I mean, yeah, you could probably clean the hole, but to be honest, I have never really done this because there's no point in doing it. So I'll just put this back together. Okay, so when you take this out, of course, you can take out the trigger. This trigger again is now just very simple trigger with a ball on the bottom, so it pivots. And then of course you have your front nozzle. You unscrew this nozzle like so, and then there's a smaller nozzle inside. Now these can be changed depending on what type of needle you have inside. So this is a 0.4 millimeter needle, so this is a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. And every time you change the needle, you need to change the nozzle, because otherwise the nozzle will be either too big or too small for the needle. And this really gets dirty, and as you can see, that it has like a Teflon seal, so that the paint doesn't seep out. and this is basically something that you do need to clean very often. This, however, you don't really need to clean it as often. Sometimes it can happen that the paint gets inside, but maybe because you didn't tighten this thing very well when you put it on, but I didn't really need to do that anyway. And on the very end, there's like this little protective barrier that protects the needle from being damaged, because when the airbrush is fully functional, the needle protrudes out of this little hole and is exposed. And if, God forbid, you would kind of smash or bump into the needle, you can potentially damage or twist this little very delicate bit, and basically you have to buy a new needle. That's what I'm saying. So this thing prevents you from doing stupid stuff. And just to tell you a little story, a couple of weeks ago I was very clumsy and I managed to drop my airbrush on the floor, thus damaging this protective cover. And thank God I damaged this, because otherwise I would have to replace this. So yeah, that's really good. I do find that you have to unscrew and clean this portion out, because the paint does tend to go on the threads and kind of back, but this is like a once in a month cleaning job. You don't really need to do this every single time. So yeah, we will clean that. Then on the airbrush, you can take off this little cup, this little funnel cup, which again is not necessary to take off to clean, but yes, you should clean it, because again, sometimes on these airbrushes the paint goes on into the threads and you can kind of see it. You probably can't, but I can. That's like a little dirty inside, so we'll clean that as well. And now we have like this bottom portion. Again, this is not necessary to take off, but I'm just going to show you anyway. This is just a valve that operates every time you press on it. So inside there's a spring and there's like a screw. So if I take this bottom portion off, you'll see that there's a screw inside. And this screw can be actually turned left or right depending on your needs. Now sometimes it happens on this particular airbrush that for whatever reason, maybe from vibrations or something, but this screw gets a little loose and the air starts hissing out from the airbrush. Now you don't press the trigger, but you can hear air escaping, and that's telling you that this screw is a little loose. And then you just have to do a little adjustment. You just put like a screwdriver inside. For this reason I have like this normal screwdriver, flat screwdriver that I put some tape on so that it's the correct width. So you just go inside and twist it just a tiny amount so that you regulate how much air escapes and not. So yeah, otherwise you don't really need to touch this or clean this. So I just showed you this so you will see what it is. So we'll put this back. Okay, the last thing that you can do on this airbrush is untighten this little inside bolt. Inside there's like a little bolt inside, and it houses the Teflon seal inside, right? Now I said earlier that I managed to damage the seal, and I did that because I used too much force when I was cleaning the barrel, and I somehow poked the seal inside, and I'll show you how it looks. So if I take this screwdriver and go inside and just untighten it, so very carefully to take it out because it has a very small I think it's out. Yeah, see, there's a little white seal, and it's black because I was using black paint. This seal actually prevents the color from here to go back through the tube and into the trigger mechanism. This is actually the only barrier that prevents this from happening. So if you damage this seal by making this hole larger than it's supposed to be, the paint will eventually seep in. And the reason that I'm telling you this, because when I damaged the seal and I put some paint in, the paint started seeping in the back, and I started seeing green paint seeping out from the edges, and I was like, what the hell? And when I took it apart, it was like all messy, and it was like, oh no. I was really scared that I really messed it up completely, but thankfully it was just a seal and I was able to replace it. They're not that expensive, but still, I mean, this Teflon seal should last you far longer than 5 months, you know, I'm just saying. So in normal operations, you don't really need to take this out, but I do this every month or every time I do a major build, and I clean the airbrush properly, because I have to stress this enough. You have to maintain your tools, whether it be brushes or airbrush, if you have just the one, like me. Cleaning your tools is essential for good and long performance. So this is basically everything that you can take out from this airbrush. Now it's just time to clean it. For this reason, I have several things that I use on a regular basis. One of which is this thing. And this is actually a trick that Andy from Hobby Headquarters said. This is like a universal cleaning agent. It's like a citrusy thing, and it's really good when you're just changing colors. You know, in between colors, you just spray it inside. I use this little crappy brush. I kind of scrape the paint and then just plunge it out the nozzle into this cup. And I do this like maybe 2 or 3 times, and then afterwards I just use normal airbrush cleaner like this one. You can get like Tamiya or Vallejo or any other manufacturer. It doesn't really matter as long as it's airbrush cleaner. I also use this one. It's like a in-house made from Poland. It's from Krakow. I use this very often as well. Or sometimes I just use plain old isopropanol, 99%. But this is really, if there's like a lot of paint buildup, I would use this. Otherwise, I really won't. So sometimes I use the same airbrush cleaner, but it's like in this solution, and I just open it up and just drop this bit inside it and just soak it for like a couple of hours, and that's basically it. So if there's like dried paint, it will soften it and it will just go out much more easily. Now Harder and Steenbeck do offer specific tools for cleaning and maintaining your airbrushes, and I'll put the picture in one of the corners and you'll see it along with the numbers. But I use their product, of course, and I use like one of these things. They're like plastic, like cotton buds, but permanent. Or my favorite would be these little things, and I'll show you a picture of them. So they're like made for this airbrush. They're like these 2 cleaning tools that you use, and you just kind of grind away, put a bit nitty-gritty. And this is also very useful, not necessary, but it's very useful. It's called a reamer. Basically just a very fine needle that helps you scrape the paint from the nozzle if it gets to the point where it's really stuck in. Anyway, to clean it, right, so what I use, I basically use just this cotton buds. I just dip them in the solution, just dip them in, and I just go into the hole. There's like a little leftover paint, and I just, do a little twirling and swirling around. See, black paint, yuck. And I also go on the edges, and I probably will speed up some processes because it's basically just me cleaning the airbrush. So right, now this is where this comes from handy for. So I take this, I dip it inside, and I go from the front, put it in the hole, and maybe you'll see it, maybe you won't, but it goes right through and through the other hole, and then you just push it in. Do a little dance like this, just swipe it off, and immediately you see it's like black because the paint was going back. So I just take some toilet paper or kitchen paper towels. See, it's like black. So I do a couple of runs with this. go inside, push it in, and just do this. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with this. It's pretty clean. Sometimes you'll see some paint crud on the ends, but if you look down the hole and it's nice and shiny, yeah, I think it's okay. Okay, so the next thing to tackle before I lose it is this thing, like the seal. So it's just a little dirty. I just swipe it a little bit. You don't need to take it out from the housing, but I can show you how it looks like, so I'll just use this needle to show you how this thing looks. So this is like this, the tiny little Teflon seal, see? Very small. And this is the only thing that protects this particular airbrush from over flooding with paint. And one other thing, this Teflon seal has to go very tight. It has to be very tight on the needle. If it's very loose, that means it's probably time for changing it. But one thing you can do, if that is the case, before changing it, of course, is that you tighten it a little bit more inside. So you don't have to tighten it very much at the beginning when it's new, but when it gets older, you can kind of tighten it a little bit more, and you kind of compress it. And when you compress it, it kind of hugs the needle more, and that's why you get a better seal. So yeah, nice and clean. Now, one thing again that you have to be very careful of, because if you don't have the specialty tool has like this little flat edge, and with like a spike in the middle that goes through the hole, and it holds the whole thing in place while you're putting it inside. But other than that, but if you don't have it, like I don't, you basically have to do this. And what you have to do is take this and put it in very gently. You must not screw it in sideways, otherwise you will damage the thread, because the metal is really soft. So you just have to catch the threads and go very carefully. Yeah, it caught it. Okay, and then you just kind of twist it back into place, and you have to tighten it just a little bit. And then you take your needle. Before you put it in, you have to clean it, and for that reason I do the same as for all the rest. I put it in this cleaning solution, and then I just kind of go like this, and immediately I will check if it's like smooth. If you can feel any bumps around, then it's still not good, but yeah, this looks fine. Now, to test whether or not the seal is good, again, this is very delicate, so be very careful if you want to do this. You put the needle inside the hole, and if you feel like resistance, a little resistance, if you feel a lot of resistance, it's not good, but if you feel a little resistance, it should be just fine. So I feel a little resistance, and this should be just fine for the use. Okay, so now we clean the main body and the needle, and we can put this back on because we won't be cleaning that. We can also put the trigger back in because we won't be cleaning that because there's no need to, and the back portion. Now, when you're putting this thing on the back, again, there's a little filly thing. You kind of have to hold it in place, and it has to be like really straight up, and you push it inside, and you put it inside the hole, and then you just kind of find the thread. Don't force it in. Sometimes it will not want to catch the thread, and you can damage it because it's a very soft metal. So yeah, see the spring inside this mechanism makes sure that this, oops, wait, let's see, because there's no needle, that happened. So the spring inside here and ensures that the trigger always falls back in the original position. That's why the spring is here. So that's basically done. Now the last thing would be this little cup, and again, I just use the bigger brush now. I use this cleaning solution, and I just go a little crazy on this, just go into the threads This is not very vital, but I like to have my tools clean. So, yeah. And I take my paper towel and just do this. Yeah, it looks fine. And then you just put it back inside. Tighten it a little bit. You have to kind of tighten this a little bit more, otherwise the paint does come right through. It doesn't matter if you have a seal, but yeah, that's my experience anyway. I'm talking to you from my experience. So I just clean this little thing. Basically the same thing, you just clean it. There you go. Nice and shiny. Put this protective guard. Oh, one thing that I can do is, what I like to do is clean the thread inside as well. Just put this cotton bud inside and it just takes all the crud out from the, see how black it was? This is great. Looks clean. And I just screw it back in place. And the last thing is I take out this. I will use my thingies. Get it out on a towel. Close this off. Wipe it off. And one thing I do is I put this brush in, well, not this one, but this one inside. And I just do the same action as in the barrel. See, there's like loads of paint inside that can potentially clog up the needle. And this is where the reamer comes in, right? You take the reamer, take the nozzle, and you put it inside, and it goes right through, and you just kind of twist it a little bit so it scrapes the surface and takes out the paint. See, there's like a little paint buildup on the edge. Yeah. You can also do this without a reamer using this needle. So what you do is, again, very carefully, you put it in and just turn it around like so. It's not the same thing, but it does the job pretty well. But just be very careful when you do this. I cannot be responsible if you damage your equipment. So again, I'll just use a little bit of this cleaner. Put it in, twist it around. Yeah, it's nice and done. I always look through. If I can see the light, then it's clean. If you look through the hole, if you look through this hole and you see the light, of course you have to look into the light. If you look into darkness, you won't see anything, duh. But if you look straight through and you see light and it's shining, it's clean. And then you insert it back inside. Take the airbrush, you screw this back portion and back, see? And the last thing that you do is you take the needle, make sure that you unscrew this back portion, you place it inside very carefully, not to damage the tip, go through the airbrush, and you will hit the Teflon seal, and you will just feel slight resistance, and you push it in, and when you see it pop out in the front, maybe you can see this, like it pops out in the front, you tighten the screw. You don't have to like tighten it really tight, but just enough so that it grabs the needle, and then you just check if it does this. See, it moves the needle, and the needle escapes from the front. This is how your paint gets out, and then you just take the cap, and you're basically done. Now I just like to swipe it a little bit so it doesn't leave any fingerprints. And this is how you maintain and clean your airbrush. So there you go, guys. That's basically it. That's how I maintain and clean my airbrush. I hope you found this to be very useful to you if you're just starting out with airbrushing. Give it a thumbs up, give it a thumbs down if you don't like or dislike. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.